Welcome to Glisso English. Real life stories.
Have you ever lived in a house that felt freezing cold, even in the middle of summer? Not because the air conditioning was on, but because someone you love completely stopped talking to you? It's called the silent treatment. Some people call it the cold shoulder. It's not just a lack of words, it's a psychological struggle. Instead of arguing, fighting, or fixing the problem, a partner shuts down for days. You end up walking on eggshells, wondering what you did wrong. Today, we're diving into a powerful 10-chapter story that follows a couple navigating this exact real-life dilemma. As we watch their story unfold, we're going to look at the psychological reality of living in a cold house, and at the same time, we're going to master the real, everyday English idioms, phrasal verbs, and expressions you need to talk about relationships, conflict, and emotional boundaries. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The sound of the door closing. The morning had started normally enough. The coffee maker was buzzing, filling the kitchen with a warm, rich aroma. But as Maya reached for the sugar, her elbow caught the edge of Liam's favorite ceramic mug. It slipped, hitting the hardwood floor with a sharp crash. Shards of blue pottery and dark liquid splattered across the room. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Liam," Maya said, immediately reaching for the paper towels. "It was a total accident. I'll order a replacement right now." She waited for his usual response, a sigh, a shrug, or even a brief flash of annoyance. Instead, there was nothing. Liam didn't flinch, he didn't look up from his phone, he simply stood up, stepped carefully around the puddle of coffee, and walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, the heavy thud of the front door echoed through the apartment. Maya stood frozen, a piece of wet paper towel in her hand. Her heart did a strange, anxious flip. She told herself she was overreacting. He was probably just running late for work and didn't have time to argue. People need space when they're upset, right? But deep down, a familiar, unsettling feeling began to root. This wasn't just a quick exit. It felt like the curtain dropping on their communication. As she cleaned the floor in the sudden, heavy quiet, the warmth of the morning completely vanished. Maya looked around the empty room, suddenly feeling like she was walking on eggshells in her own home, dreading the moment he would walk back through that door. By the next evening, the silence had settled into the apartment like a thick, heavy fog. Maya sat on the living room sofa, staring blankly at the television screen while keeping her ears tuned to the hallway. When the front door finally clicked open at 7 o'clock, her posture instantly stiffened. Liam walked inside, tossing his keys onto the entryway table with a sharp metallic clatter. "Hey, welcome back," Maya said, forcing her voice to sound bright and casual. "How was your day?" Liam didn't look up, nor did he offer a single word of greeting as he unbuttoned his coat. He walked right past the living room, his eyes fixed firmly on the wall ahead, treating her as if she were made of glass. Maya swallowed hard, the cheerful smile instantly fading from her face. She followed him into the kitchen, determined to break through the icy barrier he had built around himself. "I was thinking about making pasta for dinner," she said, leaning against the counter. "Do we need to pick up any milk from the store?" Liam opened the refrigerator, took out a pitcher of water, and poured himself a glass, without acknowledging her presence. The total absence of eye contact felt like a physical slap in the face. He took a slow sip, set the glass down on the counter, and walked out of the room to change his clothes. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the emptiness he left behind. Maya stood alone in the center of the room, her hand resting flat against the cold granite countertop. She realized then that the rules of the house had completely shifted without her consent. Every step she took, every breath she drew, felt loud, clumsy, and entirely unwelcome. She was no longer sharing a home with her partner. She was coexisting with a ghost who refused to speak.
Hours bled into days, and the absolute quiet began to play tricks on Maya's mind. She lay awake in the middle of the night, staring at the dark ceiling while Liam slept soundly on the far edge of the bed. The silence in the bedroom was so loud it made her ears ring. With no words coming from Liam, Maya's own mind became an echo chamber, repeating every conversation they had ever had. She began to overanalyze everything, searching through her memories for the exact moment things had gone wrong. Was it really just about the broken ceramic mug from Tuesday morning? Or was he still secretly holding a grudge about the weekend dinner with her coworkers? Maybe she had been too critical of his career choices lately, or perhaps she had just grown annoying to live with. The psychological weight of the unknown was exhausting. When someone refuses to tell you why they're angry, your mind automatically invents the worst possible reasons. Maya found herself trapped in a loop of constant second-guessing and self-blame. By morning, the initial anger she had felt at his cold behavior had completely dissolved into deep insecurity. She walked into the bathroom, looking at her tired eyes in the mirror and wondering how a person could feel so incredibly lonely while standing right next to the person they loved. She was starting to feel like the guilty party, even though she still didn't know what crime she had committed. The house remained freezing cold, and the storm inside her head was only getting louder.
Friday evening arrived, and Maya decided to make one last effort to restore a sense of normalcy. She spent an hour cooking a proper meal, hoping the familiar routine of dining together would melt the ice between them. When the food was ready, she set 2 plate mats at the small dining table, placing the plates exactly opposite each other. Liam walked into the room, surveyed the setup, and sat down without a word. What followed was 20 minutes of pure, agonizing discomfort. The only sounds in the apartment were the rhythmic scraping of metal forks against porcelain and the heavy ticking of the wall clock. Every time Maya shifted in her chair, the wood creaked loudly, making her feel incredibly self-conscious. She watched Liam out of her corner of eye as he cut his food with precise, deliberate movements. His face was a mask of total indifference, completely unbothered by the suffocating tension in the room. Maya set her fork down, the clatter sounding like a small explosion in the quiet room. Liam didn't even blink. He just kept chewing, entirely content in the freezing kingdom he had created. By Sunday afternoon, the walls of the apartment felt like they were actively closing in on Maya. She grabbed her coat and purse, desperate to escape the suffocating quiet, and headed to a small cafe down the street. The bell above the coffee shop door chimed cheerfully, a stark contrast to the heavy silence she had left behind. Sitting at a corner table was Chloe, her closest friend, who immediately waved her over with a warm smile. "You look exhausted," Chloe said gently, pushing a hot cup of tea toward Maya. "What's going on?" Maya took a slow sip, feeling the warmth spread through her fingers before she finally found the courage to speak. "Liam hasn't spoken a single word to me since Tuesday morning," Maya whispered, looking down at the table. She explained the broken mug, the ignored notes, the icy dinners, and the overwhelming feeling of being invisible. Saying the words out loud made the whole situation sound incredibly cruel, and Maya felt a sudden wave of embarrassment. Chloe listened intently, her expression shifting from sympathy to deep concern as Maya spoke. "Maya, that isn't just someone needing space to cool down," Chloe said firmly, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "That is psychological manipulation, and it's meant to make you feel powerless."
Hearing someone else validate her pain felt like a sudden, massive weight lifting from Maya's chest. For days, she had been trapped inside her own head, convinced that she was the one who was breaking the relationship. Stepping outside the cold house and hearing a friendly, rational voice reminded her of a simple truth she had forgotten. She was a human being who deserved to be heard, not a ghost to be completely ignored.
Maya returned to the apartment late that afternoon, the temporary warmth from the cafe fading the moment she turned her key in the lock. The silence inside was waiting for her, as heavy and unchanging as a block of ice. She walked down the narrow hallway and stepped into the bathroom to wash her hands, automatically keeping her movements quiet out of habit. As she reached for the towel, she stopped and looked up at her reflection in the mirror. The person staring back at her looked completely unfamiliar. There were dark, anxious circles under her eyes, and her shoulders were drawn inward as if she were trying to occupy as little space as possible. She realized with a jolt of fear that she had been creeping around her own home for 5 days, trying not to make a sound, breathe too loudly, or cause any disturbance. The silent treatment hadn't just changed the atmosphere of the apartment, it had actively eroded her sense of self. She had transformed into a timid, anxious shadow of who she used to be, constantly managing her behavior to appease someone who wouldn't even look at her. Liam's weaponized silence was working exactly as intended, chipping away at her confidence until she felt small and entirely insignificant. Maya pressed her palms flat against the cool glass of the sink, staring deeply into the eyes of the ghost in the mirror. A quiet, simmering spark of anger began to replace the heavy layer of sadness that had weighed her down all week. She was tired of being invisible, tired of apologizing for existing, and tired of losing herself in a house that refused to let her speak. Monday evening arrived, bringing the 6th full day of absolute, suffocating silence. Maya was standing in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly from the exhaustion of the past week as she prepared a simple salad. Liam walked into the room to grab a bottle of juice from the refrigerator, his movements as cold and indifferent as ever. As he turned to leave, his elbow brushed against the edge of the glass salad bowl sitting on the counter. The bowl tipped over, shattering instantly against the floor and sending pieces of glass and lettuce flying everywhere. The sudden, violent noise seemed to tear right through the fragile silence that had held the apartment hostage for days. Liam paused for a fraction of a second, looked down at the mess, and then turned his back to walk away just as he had done before. Something inside Maya snapped. "Stop right there," Maya said, her voice ringing out loud, clear and steady in the quiet room. Liam froze in the doorway, his back still turned toward her, but he didn't make a move to speak. "I am done cleaning up your silence, and I am done acting like I am invisible in my own home." For the first time in 6 days, Liam slowly turned around, his eyes locking onto hers with a mixture of surprise and sudden irritation. Maya stood her ground, her posture straight and her chin held high, refusing to shrink back down into the anxious shadow she had been all week. The breaking point had finally come, and she was no longer begging for his permission to speak. Monday evening arrived, bringing the 6th full day of absolute, suffocating silence. Maya was standing in the kitchen, her hands trembling slightly from the exhaustion of the past week as she prepared a simple salad. Liam walked into the room to grab a bottle of juice from the refrigerator, his movements as cold and indifferent as ever. As he turned to leave, his elbow brushed against the edge of the glass salad bowl sitting on the counter.
The bowl tipped over, shattering instantly against the floor and sending pieces of glass and lettuce flying everywhere. The sudden, violent noise seemed to tear right through the fragile silence that had held the apartment hostage for days. Liam paused for a fraction of a second, looked down at the mess, and then turned his back to walk away just as he had done before. Something inside Maya snapped. "Stop right there," Maya said, her voice ringing out loud, clear, and steady in the quiet room. Liam froze in the doorway, his back still turned toward her, but he didn't make a move to speak. "I am done cleaning up your silence, and I am done acting like I am invisible in my own home." For the first time in 6 days, Liam slowly turned around, his eyes locking onto hers with a mixture of surprise and sudden irritation. Maya stood her ground, her posture straight and her chin held high, refusing to shrink back down into the anxious shadow she had been all week. The breaking point had finally come, and she was no longer begging for his permission to speak.
Liam stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, staring at Maya as if seeing her for the first time in a week. The heavy wall of silence he had built so carefully was suddenly full of cracks, shattered by the sound of her voice. "You broke my favorite mug," Liam said, his voice arriving raspy and unpracticed after days of absolute disuse. Hearing him speak didn't bring the magical relief Maya had spent the last 6 days desperately praying for. Instead, the petty, childish nature of his words only made the hot anger in her chest burn a little brighter. "A mug is just a piece of ceramic, Liam," Maya said, her voice remaining steady and calm as she looked him dead in the eye. "But what you did to this house and what you did to me for 6 full days is completely unacceptable." Liam crossed his arms across his chest, his jaw tightening as he tried to regain his familiar grip on the emotional upper hand. "I needed space," he muttered defensively, looking away from her toward the shattered glass on the floor. "I didn't want to get into a huge, dramatic argument over a stupid mistake." "Needing space means telling your partner you need a time out to cool down," Maya countered, taking a firm step forward. "Ignoring my presence, refusing to look at me, and treating me like an invisible ghost is not needing space. It is cruel." For the next hour, the words poured out of them like water rushing through a broken dam, but the emotional landscape had completely shifted. Maya was no longer the anxious, trembling version of herself who'd spent the week begging across a deep chasm for a single scrap of attention. She laid out her boundaries clearly, refusing to accept her excuses or swallow her pride just to keep a fragile, unhealthy peace. Liam finally apologized, though his words felt stiff, awkward, and heavily weighted down by his own stubborn pride. As they finally went to bed that night, the absolute quiet returned to the apartment, but the suffocating, manipulative weight of the silence was completely gone. The ice had finally broken, but Maya lay awake, knowing that a massive, permanent shift had occurred inside her heart. 2 weeks had passed since the night the glass bowl shattered, and the atmosphere in the apartment had entirely changed. The heavy, suffocating weight that had once filled every corner of the rooms was completely gone. Maya stood by the living room window, enjoying the warm morning sunlight, sipping tea from a brand new ceramic mug. She and Liam had spent many long, difficult hours talking through the emotional damage caused by those 6 days of cold isolation. It hadn't been an easy fix, and the relationship still carried a fragile, uncertain weight as they worked to rebuild their trust. But Maya had made one thing completely non-negotiable from the moment the silence broke. She would never again allow herself to shrink, walk on eggshells, or become a ghost in her own home just to keep a fragile peace.
Liam was actively making an effort to catch himself when he felt the urge to shut down, learning to voice his frustration instead of retreating into a weaponized quiet. Whether their paths would stay intertwined forever remained an open question, but Maya no longer feared the answer. She looked around the quiet room, realizing that a simple silence could actually be peaceful when it wasn't being used as a tool of control. She took a deep, clear breath, feeling the full expansion of her lungs and the steady, reassuring beat of her own heart. Her voice had returned, her boundaries were firmly in place, and the freezing house had finally warmed back up to a place she could live in. Maya smiled gently to herself, stepped away from the window, and walked forward into a future where she would always be heard.
And that brings us to the end of Maya and Liam's story. Living in a cold house is incredibly difficult, but as Maya discovered, your voice and your boundaries are worth standing up for. Now, let's take a look at the language that brought this story to life. Did you catch idioms like walking on eggshells or phrasal verbs like second-guessing? I want to hear from you in the comments below. Have you ever experienced the silent treatment? How did you handle it? Let's practice our English by sharing our thoughts together. If you want to master all the advanced relationship vocabulary, idioms, and expressions we used in today's chapter, make sure to see our full vocabulary breakdown below in the description box. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community and never miss a new story. Thank you so much for watching. Keep practicing your English, and I'll see you in the next story. Goodbye.